Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This particular presentation, brothers and sisters, will be about the matter of the Israelites in the era of the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire, according to Herodotus, had 20 provinces. The scriptures say 127, but it's still talking about the same distance. Depends upon one's mindset of geography. It went all the way from what we call India all the way to Ethiopia. So the Bible in this particular case gives you a land geographic matter, which kind of, brothers and sisters, brings us to an understanding that there's no way, shape, or form that the Western Hemisphere, brothers and sisters, is the land of promise. The land of Canaan is not in the Americas. The land of Egypt is not in the Americas. And the lands that the Bible speaks of lets us know that for evidence purposes. So, what we want to discuss and taking in respect advantage of what is referred to as Black History Month. And what we want to talk about in discussing and taking in respect, brothers and sisters, of the fact of the era of Purim. Let us talk, as many brothers and sisters are concerning the matter of Purim. Purim comes from the word pur, which means lot. The word pur also in Hebrew is a verb meaning to cast lots. When you cast lots, what you're doing is you're trying to sit there and see who's guilty in a particular matter, or what is to come of the outcome of the guilty in that particular matter, of who is going to be discovered as the guilty party. That's what casting lots is. All right. So now what essentially happened was you had a guy named Mordecai, and then you had Esther, or Hadassah in Hebrew. And brothers and sisters, the people of the Persians wanted to have the Israelites annihilated, kind of in a sad way that Deuteronomy 28 talks about when it says, you shall be a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. The Persians, the people for sure, did not like the Israelites. The emperor who ruled during the time is Ahasuerus, also known in many cases as Xerxes in history. So, brothers and sisters, this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. In order to do so, we wanted to, as the Israelites, present our stance concerning history regarding Black people, if you will. On this channel, we have discussed the matter of the people of Persia and Shushan, the palace, if you will, as being people of color. What we want to discuss in this particular matter, brothers and sisters, is where the Israelites fit in all of that. So I ask, get your pen, your pad, your pencil, your paper, take notes. And if you happen to dislike the video, please leave in the comments why you dislike it. Thank you. Shalom. Giving honor to the Creator of heaven and earth. This presentation, the Hebrew dispersion throughout Africa in light of Black History Month, will focus on what happened with the Israelites from the era of the Persian/Ottoman Empire. All right. Now, to give a backdrop of this, you have it to where Cyrus II in the 6th century BCE had already conquered Astyages of the Medes and already annexed the Median Empire into his own. By the time the Israelites come in contact with the Persians, the Medes are already part of the Persian Empire. So thus you see Medo-Persian Empire, or the Medes and Persians, written of periodically, say in the book of Daniel. All right. So this is something we want to emphasize for edification purposes. Next slide. Thank you. What you are looking at here, brothers and sisters, is a map of the land of Israel in ancient days. This here we know and see as the Mediterranean Sea, brothers and sisters. All right. Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Israel as a people, even before the divided monarchy, under the timing of Rehoboam and Jeroboam, they were already being besieged and already began dispersing to different places, brothers and sisters. All right. So we're going to do kind of like a backdrop and then get back into the subject matter of what we were talking about regarding Judah and Persia. All right. Now, Judah as a kingdom had Israelites of the northern tribes living within the southern kingdom of Judah. And that you can reference your own when you go in the Bible in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 12, verse 17. All right. So now the kingdom of Israel fell to the Assyrians in the 8th century BCE, namely to say during the time of Sargon, and prior to that, to the era, brothers and sisters, of Shalmaneser. So in light of all of that, we wanted to talk in this particular matter. The next thing in part that we do want to address concerning this history, concerning the timeline, brothers and sisters, is the fact that Judah went into the Babylonian captivity, but there were Israelites of the northern kingdom already living in Judah. So by default, you would have already had Israelites of the northern kingdom inside of where the Israelites and Judites were in Babylon. In many cases in Israel, sometimes you may say, not many, but sometimes, right? There are Israelites who teach that Israel went to Assyria and that Judah went to Babylon. But for those who are familiar, you also know that Judah also went to Assyria during the era after Sargon, during the era of Sennacherib, as we pointed out on this channel in more than one video. So now, in light of all of that, the tribes of Israel were taken into captivity. Some wound up going north to Assyria. Some went east to Babylon. And as the book of Judges points out, that Israel was delivered into the hand of the spoilers. So that helped, in a sad way nonetheless, to bring forth the aspect of the dispersion of Israel even stronger. Let us go on to the next slide. Israel in the north, Judah in the south. And here we see Moab, Ammon. Here we see Edom. Now, what do we want to point out, brothers and sisters, is we see here Phoenicia. Phoenicia, Sidon, Zarephath, and Tyre, and all this area as we see right here, brothers and sisters. From there, you had tribes of Israel, such as Asher, such as Zebulun, brothers and sisters, that went from there and went over, if we will, along with Canaanites, to the people in Tunisia. They, in part, became known as the Carthaginians in history. This has been pointed out in several cases. Will Durant, in his book called Caesar in Christ, talks about that. Ian Wilson, in his book called The Bible is History, talks about that. So these are things we just want to point out and for evidence purposes. In the book that I wrote, Israelite History as it relates to the world, I spoke about how the Israelite king Ahab, and during his era, in brothers and sisters, corresponding to the time of Shalmaneser III of Assyria ruling in Assyria, pushed the Israelites going into northern Africa. The person who ruled after Ahab, or pardon me, the person who ruled prior to Ahab was Omri, and prior to him, brothers and sisters, was Yehu. Yehu, king of Israel, is shown prostrated, brothers and sisters, to the Assyrian king Shalmaneser III. You had the Assyrians that was taken in today what we call tribute from the Israelites. The era of Adad Nirari of Assyria, and the era, brothers and sisters, of Jehoash, king of Israel, right down to the time of Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria, brothers and sisters, right down to the era of Menachem, king of Israel. Israel was being besieged. In today's terms, they will call it being sunned, being humiliated, being humbled. They were paying the Assyrian kings tribute to avoid being besieged. That's what we're doing in America today. We're paying rent or mortgage in order to avoid being besieged. So, brothers and sisters, these are things we want to point out for evidence purposes. Regarding this map too, we want to show here in regards with Judah, known in many cases, brothers and sisters, as the southern kingdom. After the split of the northern and southern tribes of Israel, you had the Levites that was in the north and the Levites that was in the south. You know that because they had to get one of the Levitical priests to teach the Samaritans the ways of the Israelites. So now, by the time we get into Assyria's fall to Babylon, the book of Lamentations speaks about Israel in the land of Babylon. So we want to emphasize that the captivity wasn't quote unquote as neat as saying Judah was only in Babylon and Israel was only in Assyria. The kingdoms of each of them fell respectfully. Israel to Assyria, Judah to Babylon. Ahaz was the king of Judah when, brothers and sisters, the northern kingdom of Israel fell. After Ahaz, you had Hezekiah. During the reign of Hezekiah, he sent porters to some of the people of the northern tribes of Israel, such as you may see here, brothers and sisters. All right? Ephraim, Manasseh, Zebulun, and Issachar. And he invited them to go to Jerusalem in the Bible in 2 Chronicles chapter 30, so they can keep the Passover. Some went, some did not. So the fact that Ahaz was the king when the northern tribes of Israel fell as a kingdom, and Ahaz's son was talking to the Israelites that were in the vicinity of where the northern kingdom was, shows that not every one of the 10 tribes of the north, quote unquote 10 tribes, we're going to talk about that in a second, was taken into captivity. The kingdom fell. Not each and every single human being that was in that kingdom was brought into captivity. Now, why do I say the aspect of the said 10 lost tribes? The 12 tribes of Israel by birth is Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Brothers and sisters, the Bible tells us that the Levites have no land inheritance for themselves. In the book of Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 8. Joshua 14 tells us, for geographical reasons, you had the tribe of Joseph becoming two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. So geographically, in ancient days, there were still 12 different land masses. Reuben, Simeon, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. The Levites were in other people's lands. You had the brothers and sisters, the Levitical cities. Of those Levitical cities being 48, 6 of them were the 6 cities of refuge. The cities of refuge is mentioned in the Bible in Joshua chapter 20. 3 on the east side of the Jordan and 3 on the west side of the Jordan. The tribes of Israel that was taken sadly into captivity first were the tribe that was on the east side of the Jordan, starting, brothers and sisters, with Gad, Manasseh, and Reuben, then going on into the tribe of Naphtali, then going on from Naphtali, Issachar, Zebulun, and then just snatching the kingdom in the 8th century BCE when Hoshea, the king of Israel, was ruling. On this channel, doing and while we are taking respectful advantage of what is called Black History Month, we discussed that Hezekiah, that Hoshea, written in 2 Kings chapter 17, made a allegiance with the king of Egypt named Shabaka. Shabaka was a king during the 25th dynasty of Egypt. This is how you can show how the history connects one with another, brothers and sisters. What we're looking at here is called by many people the Dead Sea. The Israelites in the land of Israel today refer it as Yam Hai, the living sea or the live sea. And it flows, brothers and sisters, going downward. It goes south. It's called the Jordan River, as we see here. The Jordan River, brothers and sisters, divides east and west of the land of Israel. So now, geographically, we want to point out you had the Philistines over here, or the people that was called in Egyptian records called the Pileset, aka the Philistines. I contend that several of the people called the Sea Peoples were actually Israelites of the tribe of Dan, referred to in the Sea Peoples as the Denyen. In the Bible, in Judges chapter 5, it says, "Why does Dan dwell in ships?" They were known for being sea merchants, which was considered to be odd, knowing that Zebulun was expected to be such. Nonetheless, brothers and sisters, we see here the word Joppa. That, brothers and sisters, was where the Israelites had a conflict with the Philistines, as in Ashdod, as in Ashkelon. The Israelites and the Philistines, from the era of Saul and into the era of David, and all the way down, brothers and sisters, to the era of King Uzziah of Judah, had issues with the Philistines. The Philistines were Hamite nations, or part of the Hamite nations. Let's go on. History notes. Assyria took Israel in 721 BCE. Babylon defeated Assyria in 609 BCE. Babylon took Judah in 586 BCE. Persia defeated Media in 550 BCE and defeated Babylon in 538 BCE. Persia allowed some Israelites to go back to the land, meaning the land of Israel, in 538 BCE. Persia defeated by Greece in 331 BCE. Greece under the matter after Alexander. The Ptolemies have ruled over Israel from 320 BCE until 198 BCE, when Scopas was defeated by Antiochus III. Greece lost to Rome in 2 parts, one in 168 BCE in the Pydna battle, when Paulus defeated Perseus. 1 and 146 BCE, when Mummius defeated the Greeks in the Third Corinth battle. So these are just dates and names and peoples that we just want to talk about for evidence purposes. Let us go on, brothers and sisters, to the next part. The Assyrian Empire. We see here the Egyptian kingdom. We see here where the Israelites was at, in part where you see Judah and Babylon. Brothers and sisters, the Assyrians defeated the Egyptians as they did defeat the Israelites. You had the king Esarhaddon, who defeated Taharqa of the Egyptians. You had Ashurbanipal, brothers and sisters, who defeated the kings of the 26th dynasty of Egypt. Both of those kings, Esarhaddon as well as Ashurbanipal, both spoke of the Israelites in their record. We want to emphasize on this kind of matter because it shows in part how the Israelites were in that history. Let us go, if you will. You had the Babylonians and the Chaldeans in this particular area here, over in modern day Iraq. So, again, showing the map where the people were at, and let's move on. The Babylonian Empire, showing here where Israel was, where Lydia was, where Media and Persia were. They defeated, brothers and sisters, the Assyrians. Let's go on. The Persian Empire. We have, brothers and sisters, Parthia. That becomes important. The Parthians become important during the era of the Roman Empire, during the era of Antiochus VII. And there's more information on that in the book that I wrote, Egypt Talk and Writing. Now, brothers and sisters, looking at this Persian Empire, you see the lands in which they had, and it included where the Israelites were at. Let's go on. Notes in Ezra in the Bible, chapter 1, verse 8 through verse 11. Sheshbazzar was a son of Shealtiel. Sheshbazzar is a Babylonian name. Shema Sa Bu'asur, meaning Shamash protect the father, in a Babylonian thing. Zerubbabel was the successor of Sheshbazzar. Zerubbabel too is a Babylonian name. Zerubbabeli, meaning seed of Babylon. Now, in the Bible, in Ezra chapter 1, verse 8, it says this: even those that Cyrus, king of Persia, bring forth by the hand of Mithredath, the treasurer, and number them unto Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. And this is the number of them: 30 charges of gold, 1,000 charges of silver, 29 knives, 30 basins of gold, silver, basins of a second sort, 410, and other vessels, 1,000. All the vessels of gold and all the silver were 5,400. All these did Sheshbazzar bring up with him of the captivity that were brought up from Babylon unto Jerusalem. So, as we can see, the backdrop kind of helped, hopefully, because it gets you into the mindset of what happened with Babylon and the Persians. Babylon and what happened with Judah. And being that you had the Israelite royalty already in Assyria, when it fell to Babylon, Where do you think many of those Israelites went that was in Assyria? I contend in the book that I wrote that they became, in part, some of the first dispersed people in northern Africa of the Israelites. What info do you have on it? Please bring to the table. Toda Rabbah. Thank you. Now, let's go on. First Ezra chapter 2, verse 12 to 15 in notes. And it says this: and by him they were delivered to Sennabassar, the governor of Judea. And this was the number of them, 1,000 golden cups, and 1,000 of silver, censers of silver 29, vials of gold 30, and of silver 2,410, and 1,000 other vessels. So all the vessels of gold and of silver which were carried away were 5,469. These were brought back by Sennabassar together with them of the captivity from Babylon to Jerusalem. Now, we have already pointed out that during the 6th century BCE, brothers and sisters, is when the people of the southern kingdom went into the Babylonian captivity. We want to take time out now, brothers and sisters, and read in the scriptures. We're going to read in Jeremiah chapter 50. And we're going to see what it says. Jeremiah chapter 50, we're going to start in verse 33. And it says this: thus saith the Lord of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together, and all that took them captive held them fast. They refused to let them go. So, brothers and sisters, the children of Israel and the children of Judah, those who held them captive, were the Assyrians and the Babylonians. They refused to let them go. So it took a war, brothers and sisters, in the 6th century BCE in order for Cyrus to gain any kind of control. What are we pointing out in part? There was never a successful treaty made between enemies, and one became the stronger one via that treaty. It was always a war. So let us continue in this. During this time, Babylon was rebelling against Persia. It was known to have been a violent time for people walking in the streets. This, according to some, is why politically a king of the house of David was not situated on the throne as before the era of the Babylonian sovereignty. So what are we saying? During the era, brothers and sisters, when Egypt was ruled by one of the satraps of Persia, all right, you have it to where the Israelites did not have one who was of the line of David sitting on the throne of the house of Israel. Nehemiah chapter 2 in the Bible lets us know that the guy Nehemiah, he had to sit there and get permission from Ahasuerus in order to be able to go back to his people in Jerusalem. So these are things we just want to point out for reference purposes. Zerubbabel was a leader of the people who returned. He also was an assistant of Jehozadak, the high priest. Let us go and read, brothers and sisters, in the scriptures. And Haggai, chapter 2. So, brothers and sisters, we can sit there and see what it says concerning this kind of matter. We are in the Bible, in the book of Haggai, chapter 2, and we're going to be reading in verse 1. And it says the following. Needed time to get to it. Sorry about that, brothers and sisters. Haggai chapter 2, verse 1 says, in the 7th month, and the 21st day of the month, came the word of the Lord by the prophet Haggai, saying, speak now to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and to the residue of the people, saying, who is left among you that saw this house in her first glory? And how do you see it now? Is it not in your eyes in comparison of it as nothing? Yet now be strong, O Zerubbabel, saith the Most High, and be strong, O Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and be strong, O ye people of the land, saith the Most High, and work, for I am with you, saith the Most High of hosts. According to the word that I commanded with you when you came out of Egypt, so my spirit remaineth among you. Fear ye not. The Most High was giving the people confidence, assurance that he is with them. So that is what we want to point out for reference purposes. It says in quote, verse 4, yet now be strong. Brothers and sisters, this is meaning strong mentally, physically, spiritually. Don't have that, I can't do it. It ain't gonna work. What's the point? Don't have that spirit when you're dealing with the Most High. It's a fine line between arrogance and confidence. Moses and Joshua were told to be strong and good courage. No disrespect intended. The spies that were sent out in Numbers chapter 13 in the Bible, they didn't have Kazak we Amat of being strong and of good courage. And they died in their cowardice. Let's go on, brothers and sisters, to the book of Zechariah, chapter 3, verse 1. And it says this. We are in the book of Zechariah, chapter 3, verse 1. And it says this. And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of Yah, and Satan standing at his right side to assist him. And the Lord said unto Satan, Yah rebuke thee, O Satan, even Yah that hath chosen Jerusalem, rebuke thee. Is it not this? A brand plucked out the fire. Now Joshua was clothed with filthy garments and stood before the angel. What was the point in reading that? It goes on to say, and he answered and spoke unto those that stood before him, saying, take away the filthy garments from him. And unto him he said, behold, I have caused thine iniquity to pass before thee, and I will clothe thee with a change of raiment. Brothers and sisters, Israel, as we already know in Isaiah, it says, put on thy beautiful garments. We already read about put on your strength, O Zion. The book of Lamentations compared the sons of Israel like unto gold. So these are things in accolades, if you will, that just go to show the greatness that we were as a people. So another thing I would like to point out, brothers and sisters, is that it says that the priests in Zechariah 3 were clothed with filthy garments. And then he was told that he will be given clean garments. See, you can't bash something down without coming with an answer and a solution. Not just a response. Because your bash, your disrespect, and your insult, that's a response. But it's not an answer. It's not a solution. What is the solution that we have? What can we gain in part in what we refer to as Black History Month and the Black Expos that people talking about have done and will do? What have we gained this year in quote unquote Black History Month that we did not gain from the last one? What have we shared? What have we learned? were we strong enough to even go and say the highways and byways, online or offline, to bring a message to our people regarding our history, our true and suppressed history, the history of us being the children of Israel, the history of us being the people of the Most High. Let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. Thank you. Haggai chapter 2 and 18. Ezra chapter 5 verse 16 to 17. And Zechariah chapter 4 verse 9 through 10. Consider now from this day and upward, from the 24th day of the month of, the 24th day of the 9th month, even unto the day that the foundation of the Most High's temple was laid. Consider it. Brothers and sisters, the people were going to be told and did build the house that became in history known as the Second Temple. Then came the same Sheshbazzar and laid the foundation of the house of Elohim, which is in Jerusalem. And since that time, Salikha, and since that time even unto now, hath it been in building, and yet it is not finished. Now therefore, if it seem good to the king, let there be search made in the king's treasure house, which is there at Babylon, whether it be or so, that a decree was made of Cyrus the king to build this house of Elohim at Jerusalem, and let the king send his pleasure to us concerning this matter. Let's go on. The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands shall also finish it, and thou shalt know that Yah of hosts has sent me unto you. For who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. They are the eyes of Yah, which run to and fro through the whole earth. Brothers and sisters, what is that saying? That the Most High sees everything. Sometimes people wonder, oh, how did you find that out? Yah let it be known. If we know ourselves as Israel, and we know good and well that that truth of us being the children of Israel has been suppressed and down, suppressed and down, suppressed and down, and people saying they could be anything on earth. But as soon as you say of the house of Israel, that is something they want to sit there and wonder and find out about. See, a difference with Israel and say these other, no disrespect intended, conscious groups, if you will, is Israel has a culture and a land. Israel, brothers and sisters, has a history. And no matter how many times they try to suppress that history and push it down and call it the Old Testament and don't have to deal with that no more, the truth of Yah is forever, says the book of Psalms, chapter 117. So it was only a matter of time, brothers and sisters, for the house of Israel to find out who they are. You cannot suppress that truth forever. Let's go on. The Yahud coin. In the 4th century BCE, silver coins were minted in Jerusalem carrying the inscription Yahud, the Aramaic word for Judea. This right to mint coins is an indication of the great degree of autonomy granted to Judea in the last decade of Persian rule. In the Persian Empire, the right to mint coins attested to the respected political status of a province. The coin is the first common usage of the word Judea. And as you can see, this is found in the Israel Museum. Well, y'all Israelites never saw anything in archaeology. Y'all Israelites never show anything. But then when you tell them about the Israel Museum, when you tell them about the artifacts, when you tell them about the writings, when you tell them about, say, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and when you sit there and tell them about the Silver Scrolls, and when you sit there and talk to them about, brothers and sisters, what was found and what is inside the Hecht Museum, Hecht, in Haifa, Israel, as shown in the books that I wrote. What we're looking at here, Yahud, the Yod, the Hey, the Dalet. All right? This right here on the right-hand side on the top shows an image of one of Judah minted on a coin, brothers and sisters. Looks like an afro to me on the guy, but okay. And let us go on, if we will, to the next slide. The Persians of importance to Israel. Cyrus was the father of Cambyses. Cambyses and later his cousin Darius held sway over the empire. Darius defeated the Babylonians, the people in Thrace and Macedonia. There were two dynasties in Egypt, which were Persian, Dynasty 27 and Dynasty, brothers and sisters, 31. In Ezra 4, in the Bible, in Ezra chapter 4, the people from the province of Persia wanted the Persians to stop the Israelites from building the temple. Don't have the Ayudia, as the Romans called them, or the people of Yahud, as they were called, brothers and sisters, in the time of Persia. Don't have them build that temple. Do not have them build that temple. That was something, brothers and sisters, that they definitely did not want the people to sit there and achieve. They knew of the connection between the Most High and his people. Don't have them build it. Then later on, while they wanted to destroy the culture of Israel with the Greek and the Roman Empire, the people who were teaching about the Roman gods to the Israelites were not made to have to pay tax. So now, considering the fact that they hold crafty converse against the people of the Most High, as Psalms 83 says, to cut the name of Israel off, that it may be no more in remembrance. The church does not pay taxes. You're not going to get certain truths of who we are via the church. This is no insult. This is no disrespect intended. Cyrus II ruled in Persia and conquered lands in Greece. Cambyses ruled in Egypt, era of the Israelites in Elephantine Egypt. Darius I ruled in Egypt, mentioned in Daniel chapter 9. Xerxes I ruled in Egypt, mentioned in Esther in the Bible as Ahasuerus, also known as pointed out Xerxes, okay? Artaxerxes I ruled in Egypt, the Persian king in the time of Ezra. So these are just peoples and names that we want to point out for reference purposes. Let's go on to the next part. Ezra chapter 6, verse 6 to 7. And it says, now therefore, Tatnai, governor, beyond the river, Shetha Baznai, and your companions, the Afar Shettites, which are beyond the river, be ye far from thence, which are beyond the river. What do we want to point out in that case with the matter of said beyond the river? The river that is talking about in the book of Ezra, chapter 6 in there, is the Euphrates. The beyond the river is over where the Medes and the Persians were ruling. So on this side of the river, you eventually get to where the Israelites was at, going west of the Euphrates River. Going east of it, or beyond the river, as it was called, all right, that right there gets you into where the Medes and the Persians were at in this vicinity here. So this is just something we want to show for reference purposes. Next part. Let the work of the house of God alone. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews build this house of God in his place. So the temple was built in troublesome times, like it says in Daniel chapter 9. Let's go on. Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 19 to verse 20. But when Sanballat the Horonite, and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonites, and Geshem the Arabian heard it, they laughed us to scorn and despised us, and said, what is this thing that ye do, that ye rebel against the king? Then answered I them, and said unto them, the God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore, we his servants will arise and build. But ye have no portion, nor right, nor memorial in Jerusalem. Somebody typed in, have a can-do spirit. That's the spirit Nehemiah and the people had. The weak-minded, they didn't have that mindset. They didn't have the mindset of getting things done. That's something we want to point out for evidence purposes. What you're looking at here is a reference about the Geshem that we read of inside of the scriptures, shown in archaeology, biblical matter external. Next slide. Notes in the replica of the Second Temple. The troubles Persia had with Egypt was at the same time when the accusations made against Judah during the reign of Darius, the satrap of Egypt, rebelled against Darius. When the same time Tattenai tried to stop Zerubbabel from building the temple. When Xerxes took the throne, Egypt too rebelled against Persia's rule. Next slide. Note and source book. Some 340 Aramaic ostraca, the ostraca is the stuff that you see right here, of the Persian and Hellenistic periods, Hellenistic meaning Greek, have been excavated at 32 sites in Israel, from Yokneam in the north to Eliat in the south, with Arad and Beersheba being the main contributory sites. By far, however, the largest cache of text is what has come to be known as the Idumean Ostraca. In the book that I wrote, From Assyria to America, Part 2, I spoke about the Edomites. The Edomites were later on, as pointed out, the people called the Idumeans by the Greeks and Romans. In the book, as pointed out, for those who are interested, From Assyria to America, Part 2, I spoke about the different nations of the earth that do lay claim to being the people of Edom. So, with that being the case, let us move on. This and other books. Shalom, giving honor to the creator of heaven and earth. This presentation was presented to you all on 2/27/21. The book shown here is available on Amazon.com. For those who care to support, like as if you want the book for yourself directly from me and not through Amazon, one can cash app at $Franks Son 1. $FRANKSSON1. So that's Frankson with 2 S's in it. All right. $FRAK, pardon me, $FRANKSSON 1. All right. So, brothers and sisters, giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. This presentation, I was hoping for it to not go over an hour, and thank the Most High, it did not. There will be other presentations on this channel regarding the Hebrew language, regarding the history. And while this is closing out, come so-called Monday regarding Black History Month, we know good and well our history cannot be told within a month. It cannot be told within one night, within 17 or so PowerPoints. But brothers and sisters, we do want to set the tone in for our people who are interested in what we have to say as Israelites regarding quote-unquote Black History Month. Giving honor to Yah, Shalom. The presentation is concluded.